And good evening, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are watching here in the Philippines and from all over the world. And welcome to my podcast, the RJ Ledesma Podcast. In my podcast, I interview the country's pioneering business personalities and entrepreneurs to learn more about how they think about doing business, what are their success secrets, and can we hack those success secrets as well? How have they innovated their businesses during this pandemic? But more importantly, what business opportunities do they see emerging in the new normal and the next normal? Now, is there a business personality or entrepreneur that you would like me to interview here on the podcast? Please do let me know. Drop me a message. I would love to have them here on the program and pick their brains. We are also live right now on Kumu, CBRC TV, Global Pinas TV, and now the Bounce Back Network. If you have been enjoying this podcast and you are learning a lot from it, please subscribe and invite more friends to listen to the RJ Ledesma Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, on Google, and Apple Podcasts. And you can also catch us on YouTube. Tonight, a very special guest. We have Mr. Dr. William Yu, who is the Chief Technology Officer of MDI Novare Technologies. Now, Dr. Yu provides a direction for which technologies they will be studying, selecting, and implementing as a company in MDI Novare. Now, MDI Novare is one of the most trusted names in enabling digital transformation across enterprises in the Philippines. He is also responsible for global technology service fulfillment at Novare Technologies, a technology consulting firm working on projects which involve enterprise mobility, next-generation networks, and web-telco convergence in diverse industries, from telcos to banking and finance, software, and sales and distribution. It's some of the services that he's offering is just flying over your head or just glossing over you. Don't worry, he will explain that a bit more during our conversation here in the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome over here right now, Dr. William Yu of MDI Novare.
Hello, RJ. Good evening.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And thanks as well for coming here on the show. It's always a pleasure to have a fellow podcaster here on the show. I want to plug it right now, Kagad, because if you're learning a lot from him on this show, you can learn a lot more from him in his own podcast as well. Doc, can you share with us the name of your podcast?
Yeah, the show is called From Course to Career. It is part of the My Digital Impact podcast by MDI Novare. So you can search it in your normal podcast software, whether that's Spotify or Apple. So My Digital Impact. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can I call you William Ba or you or what? Or what do your students call you? Why you?
Why you? Pero you can call me William. You can call me
William,
William.
William, thanks so much. Like I was saying earlier on, wow, MDI Novare is doing a lot of different things in the sphere of helping digital transformation by providing services. Uh, but you know what, like I said, some of those services just might fly over the head of some people listening over here, especially if they are even people who are tech enough, are not tech savvy enough to understand maybe what you guys are doing. So if I was to bring my dad, who's a 78-year-old guy over here, to listen to what does MDI Novare do, how do we explain what are the services of MDI Novare?
Yeah, so we are essentially in the business of helping organizations go through digital transformation. So essentially use technology to improve the way they do business. Now, just to keep it a little more tangible, for example, in this time of pandemic, a lot of organizations have started to move online, right? They've started to onboard customers online, fulfill their services online, and do things online. And sometimes a lot of organizations may not have the technology or the capability, or sometimes they just need help, right? And we essentially provide that help. So we take the technology, we say digital onboarding, EKYC, for example, are some of the technologies we can bring to the fore to help them go online. Now, we started way before the pandemic, and really the need to go digital has already, it's already something that an organization must do. You can't have a business without a digital presence, and you can't be a digital business without also being able to work and tie towards the things that you are doing. So there are important technologies that we have, right, that we bring to the market, and we've been in the business for, I think we should be in our 34th year, right? So we've
Wow,
been in the
34th
market
year.
for a while. And digital transformation 34 years ago was something else. It was replacing mainframes with x86 machines, right? So the computers you and I use today, that's called x86 architecture, right? We were replacing mainframes. And then the next evolution was from proprietary networking to ether networking, right? So the networking we use today, like Wi-Fi and Ethernet switching, was the technology we were bringing to market. The next big wave was uh, mobile broadband, right? So we looked at the country and said, you know what, broadband and internet access was really not that pervasive. The technology was expensive, and that's why we brought out in a technology called mobile broadband wireless. And that company spun off. That's Radiant Telecoms, and it eventually was acquired by Smart. So the company in and of itself has already been helping transformations. It's just different at every generation, right? So again, in 33 years, we have this saying, we probably did something for somebody at some point in time.
Well, it's funny. It's like we got a crash course in digital transformation over the years and how it's
Yeah.
evolved. No? And looking back at it, and Doc, you don't look a day over. You look as young as your students. So they probably couldn't tell, no?
Thank you.
Kung
Thank
hindi
you.
ka lang, so if they didn't know any better, you could have sat down together with them in the
It
lecture
has
room.
happened. It has happened
It
actually.
has
So
happened.
I went to my class one time. So my class is Saturday morning. So Saturday nine
Uh,
o'clock, and there was this, a few years back where I walked into the class and I was early. The few times that I'm actually early for my class, so I sat down where the students sit. I didn't sit in the front, and I was just waiting. And student comes in and says, "Hi, my name is Chada. Is this CS154?" Yes. Then they start to sit down, and suddenly from the back, I stood up and I go to the front, and I'm your instructor, etc. And then you see the look in their faces. Oh, that's our instructor there. Although I don't think I can do that now, but that was a few years back. Yeah.
well, well, it's nice to know that it's your maybe the teaching advocacy keeps you young as it's your fountain of youth.
Well,
Having
that's true
said that,
because it's different, din eh.
yes, yes.
I mean, just to plug, teaching is a totally different. It's a totally different environment. Your students are receptive, right? They listen for you for two reasons. Either they really want to learn, which I hope is the case, or they were forced by their parents to take that course and they really just have to pass, right? Those are the only two reasons. And it's different from when you're talking to people at work. Because when you talk to people at work, we have a mission, right? We have a task to do. We have clients to fulfill. The pressure is different. They're both pressure, right? They're just different kinds. And I think that context switch, moving from one kind of pressure to another kind of pressure, makes the other kind of pressure not as pressureful, if there's a word for it, versus
I
the
know what
rest,
you mean.
right? So that's the so it helps, balance out because it's just something different.
Yeah. Before I move on, I want to talk a bit more about MDI Novare, but something just piqued my interest as you were talking. Like for me, I'm a professional host, but I'm really an entrepreneur, and I run several businesses.
That's right.
But I often find that you're able to draw from your other industry and bring the insight from there into the other industry that you're working in. So
That
there's a
is
sort
true.
of complementary nature, which many people don't realize. But for you, what do you get from teaching that you're able to bring into business and vice versa?
Yeah, so it works both ways, right? So one is for my students, I give very, very practical examples, right? So when I lecture about big data analytics, I give actual customer. I know I don't mention the customer, I don't share proprietary information, but I actually do state problems that are open in the market now. And at the same time, when I talk about in my networking class, for example, I actually explain like what technologies we're using right now, like the broadband that is powering this tablet right now is how I explain it. And it becomes very, very real for the student. Oh,
Mhm.
because this is how service provider A uses their technology, service provider B, and so on and so forth. So that's the one way. The other way, the students also add their own mix because I do teach grad classes, right?
Mhm.
So they're also working, right? They also have their own problems. They belong to different in industries. Some work telco, some work in bank, some work in pharmaceutical. So I have students from various walks of life that take my class, and they also bring that experience in. And that's all also useful because at the end of the day, when you hit a customer that's talking about distribution, for example, fast moving consumer goods, the distribution, I was never a fast moving consumer goods person, right? But I just so happened to remember this conversation with a student who
Ah,
presented this use case, or better yet, sometimes a project, right? They propose a project that's useful for their industry. So it works both ways. The industry can inform by allowing me to give practical examples to my students, but at the same time, the students themselves give different insights. And even the undergraduate students can be surprising because they will raise concerns or they will raise inputs about things na you'll have this thought, oh nga, no? Why don't we just do that? Especially when it comes to user experience.
mhm,
Because
mhm.
when you talk about designing the ultimate, for example, customer onboarding website, right? People will brag. Every one of my clients and everyone in the tech space will brag about my portal is the best way to onboard customers and all of that. But at the end of the day, sometimes we have to realize we are not the target market anymore. So, for example, Gen Xers like me will talk about a certain way of onboarding, but majority of the market is already millennial, right, or younger. And what they find nice may not be what we find nice, right? So I keep on telling my product team sometimes that, we like to inject our opinions. And that's not bad, but we have to listen. Because sometimes you have to realize we're not the market.
We're not the
A
market anymore.
Taipan
Yeah.
told me, yeah, we're not the target market anymore. Taipan told me once that he I'll not mention the name, but he makes juices, right? So you could
Mhm.
probably guess who. He will never test his own products because he doesn't want to give any opinion because he doesn't want his marketing people or his product people to be tainted by his own opinion because
Mhm,
he's
mhm.
the boss
Understand.
and we have to follow what he says. But sometimes
Understand.
that's not what the market wants, right? So same thing with tech, right? We think, oh, this is the best way to write a UI or this is the best mobile app. But sometimes na lipasan na tayo ng market. We're already at the,
Oh,
later end na
oh,
tayo eh.
tito-tita tayo na ngayon ng market. I just realized, when people talk about the apps,
Correct.
it's not our experience. Is not, like they keep on saying, we aren't digital natives. We're digital
Natives, we're not.
immigrants. So
Correct.
the natives, like my
Ay, we're
daughter.
the worst. We're the worst kind, RJ. How many ways did we listen to music, right? Naka-tape
Yeah.
tayo, naka-cassette, naka-CD, naka-LP, I mean, then now we listen to it streaming on Spotify. Diba? We've transitioned. Our generation is the, transition generation. We've tried so many different things.
Yeah.
Kaya sabi ko, we have to listen to the digital natives because they have different needs and they have different views as well. But it's an interesting view as well.
And Doc, having said that, there's something also I came across recently of the idea of how also, and this is partly with the topic, no, but because you're with students and they give you more insight kasi into
Yeah.
putting together like a better UI, better, especially since they're the ones going to use it. That the way that they process information is different from how we process information nowadays, how we used to process information, because they are more, they know intuitively. Let's say, for example, I have to research on Google or do something. These guys can do it much better than how we would do, I guess,
Even
research
better.
before.
Even better.
That's the way that they do it.
Actually, even better. You know why? Do you the apps today, right? The new apps. Do you ever read a manual before you use them? Never.
Not really. Oh no. Oh.
Never na, diba? So apps today are designed just to be plain usable, right? And this generation, that younger generation, grew up never having to read the manual. At least tayo. I mean, kahit paano. I mean, I have this habit. When I buy a car, I read the manual. And the dealer guy was saying, "Why are you reading the manual, sir?" I don't know. I just want to know if how to open the gas tank, etc. No. It's all intuitive. That's the word, right? It's intuitive. And I think that has improved the way we think about UX, right? The way we design interfaces. It has to lend itself to usability day one. And that's the demand of the market. The market expects that when you release your app, wala nang manual. Because if your app requires a manual, baka they won't use it. They'll not figure out how to use it. So, medyo yan eh. Parang that's also one of those realizations. And it's not an age thing. I think it's more an evolution thing. Right? Yeah. And I'm sure a few years from now, the interfaces will change, right? We are still medyo touchscreen-ish pa right now, but we were born without it. And I'm sure at some point in the future, will it be, will Siri improve to the level where it's actually usable? Or will we have like brain implants in the future? I'll never know, right? And that interface will be so alien to us that we'll be the grandfathers to say, that's not how you use that. Diba? Lolo. Hindi na tayo tito, tita, lolo, lola na at that time. Diba? Pero
super lola.
It moves.
And having said that, this is the other interesting thing. So I like what we're talking about. I like that sort of direction. We're saying that, how basically developing nowadays, we talked about digital transformation and UI and how it's more intuitive. But I wanted to ask you, particularly for the MSMEs and the small business owners and the entrepreneurs out there who are thinking, because in this crisis, obviously, many of them had to, the pinaka-gasgas na word is obviously, one is pivot and the second one is digital transformation. But digital transformation takes many different forms, just like you described. There's an evolution.
Yeah.
So if you were, let's say, for example, if we were to talk about digital transformation, what would you explain to a MSME or a small company? Why is it, what are the aspects of it to say that you are digitally transforming that business? And what should be transformed? Because for them, it can be a pretty daunting topic for people who aren't tech savvy. And even if you are, there's so much to do. So how do you define
there's so many new things.
Digital transformation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think the first advice I'll give to MSMEs in general is that nobody builds stuff from scratch anymore. Right? So you don't have to, parang there is this misnomer kasi when you talk about technology, you have to roll your own, hire a developer here, hire a administrator there, build stuff from scratch. It's no longer true. Even stuff that's built from scratch is built from something else, right? And probably somebody has done tools and libraries, and I think we're already in this era in terms of technology where there's a lot of things that can be built just by building blocks, right? You snap things together. So the technology may not be as daunting as before. Before, if you go back in time, you go to the 80s and the 90s, you wrote everything from scratch, from the user interface to the database to the structures, and you had a programming language, and that was how we learned how to program. But today, you have a web framework that already gives, you have a forms manager, you have a database system, you have cloud infrastructure. There's so many things, there's so many technologies, so much technology out there that you just have to choose the right ones and slap them together. Now, it might be intimidating, para ang dami, or where do we start? Well, you can also look at related industries, right? There are already tools and products that are out there that you can actually try to adapt. So that's the first advice that I would give. Parang when we talk about tech, it doesn't have to be from scratch, because we have this no more, let's hire a programmer, let's write it from scratch. No, don't, right? So the thing is, there's already stuff out there. The second thing is, transformation may not have to be very different from what you're doing now. Some transformations are very simple. I had this client once that his problem was, yung store ko mahaba yung pila, right? The lines were long, and I want people to line up so that they will buy products. I don't want them to line up to complain or to pay, right? So, of course, the intuitive solution for us was, okay, then give them many ways to complain and pay. The simple solution was, and we call it digital transformation, was just to put a telephone. So we have the store, right? So there's a store, there are products, right? And the people fall in line. And we just have this telephone here. If you want to complain, you pick up the phone and you can talk to somebody. And it goes to a call center somewhere else. So if you're falling in line and you see the line really long, you just look at the phone and say, parang, ayoko na mag-line, I'll just take the phone. So it redirects the traffic, saves the line for people who actually want to buy stuff. And sometimes that's enough. Looking at that customer journey, trying to see, if I were the customer, what are the steps I'm going to take? I think that's fundamental in any transformation. And the technology doesn't have to be whiz bang, right? In this case, it's actually low tech, right? It's a telephone stuck in the wall, right?
Telephone stuck on the wall.
Yeah, and we made it by, I think for this particular branch, we used the old style, looking telephone, like yung handset thingy pa. Para lang, it also looked nice, right? It was also an eye-catching thing. If you have a complaint, then it was colored red pa. So parang you can try it out, diba? So transformations can be as simple as that. And it's still digital. Why? Because you redirected. You looked at the customer journey and you said, this is the experience of this customer going to a store. I either buy, complain, or pay. But I want to redirect the complain and pay, right? And also, we also fixed the buy portion. We found out that majority of people who walk into that particular store were buying this product that was, let's just say, a simple to sell, fast-moving product. So what we did is we put a small store outside, like a standee, where the fast-moving product would be sold sa labas. Right? So we redirected traffic off so that you can focus on selling. And that's transformation, right? And of course, now in COVID, is digital is useful, but we have to give an interface to the user that they can use the device they like, anytime they want, and any place they're in. I think that's non-negotiable na. We cannot say na, in order to access my internet banking site, please use Internet Explorer 6. That's gone, right? You have to have a mobile client, you have to have a web client. At the very least, you have a reactive web interface, right? At least that works on mobile. Minimum na yan. Kasi the market now is so demanding. But fortunately, point number one is useful. There are frameworks that help you create reactive web interfaces, right? You don't have to write it from scratch. So siguro yun yung three things that are that are useful. So one is, you don't have to build stuff from scratch. Two is you have to look at the journey, and three is, of course, it has to make sense also at the end of the day.
And Doc, having said that, also, where do they know where to start? In other words, I mean, like for me, I mean, say, what I do is it per department? Is it per department? Is it technology? Is it because for people who aren't they're not quite sure where to go and how to also at the same time keep the costs down, because you want to improve, but at the same time you want to make sure that it's affordable for you.
Well, this is where design thinking and agile makes sense. I apologize. I promise not to say too many buzzwords, but couldn't help it, right? One is agile works, right? At the end of the day, start with an idea, define what your MVP is, and start with that. That means start small and iterate through it, right? Don't try to boil the ocean and say, this is my organization, I want to transform everything. They can't, right? The one that's too big, and by the time you're done transforming, the market has moved on. That's what we keep on telling our clients. If we're so obsessed with that one product and we We put so much effort and so much time to it. Sometimes the market has moved on. That's one. Two is, at the end of the day, we have to realize that we have to be elastic, right? It isn't what we think works today may not work in a week. And that's why Agile works, right? You have to start with something small and grow. And that also helps with cost, right? You have to start with something small. You fix a particular interface, but of course you have to look at the journey, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve, ba? And let's also not fall to the trap of digital for digital's sake. That's also one of those risks. I just want to create a website. Why? Because everybody has a website, right? But if you're not solving a particular problem, are you onboarding sales agents, ba? Or do you want your end users to buy direct? And sometimes when they say, "Oh, I want to sell my product all online," sometimes an online store is not the solution. Your own online store is not the solution. Sometimes you just post your product in Lazada and Zalora, right? And sometimes that's sufficient, depending on what your objectives are. So the journey might start out like that. Start small, start agile, and of course, design thinking makes sense. That's the USU term, but in school we just call that the scientific method, right? Create a hypothesis, do something, test the hypothesis. Oh, it worked a little here, but didn't work a little there. Adjust mo ng konti, test again. Adjust mo ng konti, test again, right? That works, right? There's like a process in which you can do incremental discovery. But last, of course, is don't be afraid to take risks din. Kasi sometimes masyado tayong conservative, masyado ding small, hindi rin impactful eh. Right? So we also have to look at that. So yun lang naman yung basics. But I think at the end of the day, we have to be solving a problem. I think that's what's most important. Your MVP must be solving some problem, or else it will just be tech for the sake of tech, which is really bad, by the way.
Yeah, and by the way, just so that we laymanize things, I understand MVP, but you might want to explain what does MVP mean.
Minimum viable product, right? So it's the least that you should release for the product to make sense, but it isn't, so big right away that you will take too long to build it. But that's what we tell our clients, right? Start with an MVP. What is the minimum things you have to do? And you iterate. The goal is not that you will settle for something small. The goal is start small and build on top of it. That's really how the whole agile thing works.
Got that. I'm wondering, you said you've been around for 33, 34 years for MDI Novare. And you've worked with many big companies right now. I hope you don't find this disrespectful, but MDI Novare doesn't sound like a household name, right? If you work with many big people, is it because you all work behind the scenes and that's where you guys play the best?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So MMDI or MicroD has been around for 33, 34 years. People in the industry will probably know it. Again, in 33 years, we probably sold something to somebody at some point in time. Novare, on the other hand, is a little younger. That's about 15 plus years, right? So we started it, and the goals were slightly different at the time. MDI was more focused on bringing technology and helping our clients use them. Novare, on the other hand, was focused mostly on the human portion, software, data. That's what Novare focused on. And about a few years back, we merged both companies because clients don't come to you today and say, I want hardware from here and I want the software from there. People want turnkey solutions now, so we integrated the two.
So can you give me a profile more or less? I know this. Can you share with us a bit more who've been your big clients or the people that you've been with? I mean, I'm just curious to know right now, who have you actually, or maybe you can tell me their names, but then where have you guys been playing so that that have influenced technology here in the Philippines?
Well, we're not shy about our customers, and our customers are not shy about us. So, I mean, the country's the two largest banks, for example, are our clients, the two largest telcos. You can kind of guess who they are, two largest fintechs. But at the end of the day, we've been in the industry for so long that we've probably done something to somebody. And the thing here is that at the end of the day, these companies are very highly innovative by themselves, right? So they do have their own innovation groups. They did not come to us because of our monopoly of innovation. It is they come to us because we are a trusted partner to co-innovate with them. And that's essentially what we do. We help these organizations build and go through their journeys as well. Of course, we didn't start out like that, especially in Novare, right? I mean, if you would allow me, 15 years ago, we started Novare. We were trying to build this platform. It wasn't called Novare, by the way, at the time. We were trying to build this platform where we would give Palm Pilots at the time. Palm Pilots.
Palm Pilot, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Palm Pilots to showbiz personalities in the US. Right? Showbiz personalities in the US. Where these showbiz, because we're so happy, Palm Pilots are so great. You can take videos and pictures of yourself. And the idea at the time, and this was like 15, 16 years ago, the idea at the time was people would want to see pictures of their, their stars and their, showbiz personalities taking videos of themselves, right? And this is 15, 16 years ago. This was before Twitter, this is very early. And the idea was they would actually take videos and pictures of themselves. They would post it in this React, this website and mobile website that would work in many devices. And you could subscribe to it. And you can watch these artistas, right, post stuff. And that was the idea. And we were thinking, this would be great. Kasi people would really love to watch their showbiz personalities, right? But the problem is I think we were too optimistic about the state of technology. And we were, for those of you who are in the know, parang we used the delivery method we used to send the picture. Because remember, at that time, mobile data wasn't a thing. It was GPRS, right? It was like less.
Oh my.
What was GPRS? 256 kilobits per second, right? And that was at best. Right, you'd probably get something like 14 kilobits per second if you were lucky. So, but for those who don't know the kilobits, that's slow. It's really slow. And we were trying to deliver video and pictures at the time.
Oh my
Crazy.
gosh. Oh.
It was crazy. So the experience was bad because the customer would say, hey, Wesley Snipes posted a new video about himself, or David Archuleta has this new joke, and we would push it to the subscribers. And they would get a notification. They would click it, and it would take an eternity to load. Grabe yan. So, long story short, it didn't work out, right? So we learned our lesson. We said, you know what? This is not working out. We have to change what we're doing. And it can't work, right? Because the experience wasn't good. The networks weren't ready. And we're not talking about the Philippines, by the way. We launched in the States and in Spain and in the UK, I think, were the three markets we launched. So their networks should have been better. But again, it was still GPRS. Yun yung point, right? We were expecting too much from the technology at the time. So we pivoted.
And if you think about it, if you look at the concept right now, it'd be too early because something like that one would be exactly what Instagram is right now, where you get to see your celebrities.
Actually, it was Twitter before Twitter. It was Snapchat before Snapchat, right? I mean,
Exactly.
we joke. We joke a lot. Myla and I joke a lot. You know what? We invented Twitter, but it didn't work. It didn't work, right? And the realization also was we should have done what Twitter did. Text was enough, right? Yung short text was enough. We forced the video and picture because we were so happy. Palm Pilot, right? It had a camera. It was great. Blackberries, right? I mean, those were the devices to have at the time. There was no Android. There was no Twitter at the time. So it was early, and we realized, that's not going to work. But we built so much experience integrating with different telcos, their billing platforms. We can actually do, so we did like phone plan billing, right? So we would charge to your phone plan. And in the States, the UK, and Spain, most of their subscribers are postpaid, right? So we integrated to so many systems. We learned a lot that we realized that, this experience is so useful. Even companies here in the Philippines would actually benefit from that. And we changed the business model, and we said, we're going to help companies here access that technology, right? So that was telco systems, telco integration, financial systems, and that's where we got our start. And that's the reason why most of our long-time customers are actually telcos and banks. So
in other words,
that was a very big change.
And that meant that, well, the first lesson I'm picking up from that one is that nothing was lost. I mean, technically, it was a failed project. It was a good stretching project. It was a failed project, but something came out of it. And basically, it was
That's
the
true.
bills
That's true. The
processing.
base
And
that the base, that platform, that learning was all reusable, right? The high level concept, right? The artistas sharing so that people would buy didn't work out, but the capability we built. So I have this analogy that the Great Pyramids of Giza, right? So we see the pyramids; it's so nice. But what actually made it nice also it was the ecosystem around it, right? A town was built to support the working population. A channel was cut out so that they could bring the bricks and mortar. So these platforms you build are actually useful. And sometimes, another advice to startup entrepreneurs, sometimes the idea may really not work, but the stuff you build along the way may still be useful. And most of the time they are, right? Just have to use them for a different problem.
I remember talking with Roland Ross, the one who made the Kumu, Kumu,
Kumu, yeah.
and the first 2 to 3 years weren't too good, and they were almost out of budget, running out of money, out of a runway. When they found out that the thing that worked the best for them was something which they didn't expect, which is the video component of Kumu, which wasn't the biggest function of Kumu at the time.
At the time,
So they had
yeah.
to just blow up the video function to make it sort of like this is the most important feature that it has,
And now
and,
that's the
and
star feature, right?
and that's the star feature.
And it
Or
works.
even Facebook before. Facebook's use before was for sort of like a dating app, right? Who's hot, who's not, right? In Harvard
That's
by
true.
Mark Zuckerberg when they developed that.
And actually, one of the ironic things about Facebook, the most popular part of Facebook is the friend feed, right?
Mhm.
That stream of stuff, the tree that feed, right? The Facebook feed. They actually acquired a company that did that. It wasn't even part of the
Oh.
original Facebook. So there's this thing like sometimes you just don't know. It's really the proper application of technology or using it in the right context. Like in the case of Kumo, maybe they were too focused on other features, but it was video
Mhm.
that made sense. In Facebook, originally they started out as a dating or actually meeting your high school reunion type, friends thingy, right? Which worked out, but it's not
Mhm.
enough. But what really made them grow was that that entire feed, that entire ecosystem they built around it. And sometimes you can't see that from the start, or maybe it may not have worked at the start. Who knows? If Facebook was designed with a friend feed from the start, it may not have actually worked, right? We don't know until we try.
Um, I'm looking at. I'm glad that we talked about your entrepreneurial background or when the business started out. But what I'm curious about is that if I look at your background, you are an academician. You've taught a lot in Ateneo, and it's computer
Still
science,
do,
which
yeah.
which was your and you still
Computer
do.
science, that's right. I still
So
do,
my,
yeah.
my, my question is, where did it happen that the jump was made from computer science to not making it a career and becoming an entrepreneur? Because some people they're not built to be entrepreneurs. They may be doing computer science. I'll do that forever. What
Well,
made
I'm
you
one of those.
make
I
the jump?
wasn't built to be an entrepreneur. Actually, so just to be just to share, my risk tolerance is very low, right? So I'm one of the more conservative people you would meet. So I wouldn't exactly go to like new risky investments, etc. Heck, I don't have money in blockchain, for example. So I'm conservative, right? So I went to school. I was planning to take a career in teaching, and that's the reason why I have a PhD, right? Because I was thinking, I'll just work on the side, but I'll work on my PhD and I'll do teaching, and that's what I really wanted to do. And it's true, I want to teach and I still teach up to right now, but the teaching became the part-time stuff and the work became the full-time stuff because I realized that there's so many uses of technology that the potential is still untapped. And one of the things I realized is that we as a country, for example, the Philippines, we have the potential to be equally great in software because software is democratized. Anybody can write software, right? The Java we learn at school or the Python we learn at school is the same as the Python they learn at school in America or in Europe. The libraries we use for websites is the same. So we have this, it's like this great equalizer where we all have the same stuff, right? Of course, what's different here, Siguro, is capital, and that's a whole different discussion, and that's why I'm very passionate about, we have to find a way to get funding to startups, etc. But at the end of the day, the raw technology is there, and it was interesting enough to me that I think I haven't left, but I still will retire to do teaching for sure, right? So I will definitely retire to that. But it doesn't take too much of my time now, right? So
But how did
it was different, and it's that they used to the technology. Like instead of just teaching it, you're actually using it, building something, and customers using it. That feeling is priceless, right? When people,
wow.
you know this, right? When people visit your locations, for example, your stores, you know that sense of wow, people actually like the stuff I'm building. That's great. So
Uh,
that's what drove me to what I'm doing right now, and still keeping me there.
how did you get from there and then developing a product in the States and in the UK and Spain?
Oh,
That's
the
kind of thing I was wondering.
was more like a person called me and said, "Hey, William, what are you doing now?" "Oh, I'm not doing much." "Oh, I have this project that's building this product for the States." I was hired originally to build, actually to run tech support pa nga eh, not even build the product. I actually ran support first. And of course, then they realized, hey, you also program, so you can help us with the programming and the architecture, etc. So it really just cascaded. And sometimes this is one of those surprising things where, the original reason for joining is not the reason why you're staying, right? So it's one of those cases there.
And after that was done, so it failed. The first project failed spectacularly, diba? What did you guys
Yeah,
do? That was your
spectacular.
then you pivoted, right? You pivoted to the bills
Yeah,
processing. That was your first pivot or
payment
your second pivot?
gateways, bills processing, telco integration. Simple, use SMS for this, use WAPC, parang WAP redirect, right? Mobile web for that. Helping companies use that type of technology. That was the pivot because we do a lot of that. I mean, in order to build a product that integrates to large telcos in the UK and the US, allowing us to charge subscribers through their phone plans, for example. That
Mhm.
wasn't a common thing, by the way, when we started doing it. So the ability to do that was one of those things that, hey, other organizations, I mean, for now, we take it for granted, charging stuff to airtime or charging stuff to mobile wallets, so common to us now that, you would think, is that even an innovation? But doing that 15 years ago was actually quite hard, right? And we actually helped companies do that. And that was the start. And the whole fintech, for example, is really a combination of that, right? You combining your telco technology and your banking and finance technology, which is why the whole fintech space was originally born. So that background, that technology, APIs, for example, or being able to do telco charging were the things that we had to learn and build capabilities on, and that's what became the core of what is now right? So, and that's still what we do right now.
And after all this, Doc, I just have a question. There's a point. You did say you were very risk averse, right? And you were doing all these businesses. There come a point, there's always a low point in entrepreneurial work where you're saying, "Ayoko na to." This is, and you say, "I'll just stick to teaching," right?
It's true.
Because that's sort of like your backup plan.
Yeah.
What made you
Oh my
keep on
God.
going?
Yeah. Well, one is you have to have good partners, right? Because you can't do everything yourself, right? Like for example, my risk adverseness is actually my problem, but my partners, right? So the other members of the organization are more risk gung ho, right? So they'd like to take risks. So getting good partners, I think, is a key, right? Because you can actually capitalize on your strength. So that's that point. Now, what moment in time where yoko na, I throw the towel, let's give up. Now, one of the things that I did early in my career is, for example, when I joined Novare, I didn't upgrade my lifestyle. So I behaved as if I was going to survive on a teacher's salary. Right? So lifestyle thinking, teacher salary lang ako, ito lang yung salary. Kasi I'm not sure this will last eh. And it's very risky, right? The whole proposition of getting artistas and stuff like that was weird, right? But I mean, it wasn't my thing. I didn't understand the market at the time and all of that. So did something conservatively that I could always go back to teaching. But the more you do it, the more you realize that I'm helping a lot of companies, and I'm helping a lot of their users, right? I mean, all of these, a lot of these digital platforms that are being used today are so convenient right now that I couldn't imagine not having them. And we built the tech in one way or another that runs them, or we help organizations build them, and that's kind of sticky, right? When you see that people are using your product, people are using the work of your hands, right? The craftsman's pride, right? When you make something and people actually use it, that's the thing I mentioned a while ago. That's priceless, and that one keeps me staying, right? And staying for more. So even when things get hard, you realize, the mission is worthy. The people I work with are great, right? I have to admit, if they were sucky, I would have left a long time ago. So shout out to all the MDI Novare people there. You're awesome, right? So just to your mission and people, as long as you have that, I think you're okay.
Doc Wayu, one of your students, I think, says hi. Diana Penasi Vasquez. Hi, Doc Wayu. Greeting here right now on the chat box. Thanks so
Hello.
much for listening in, Diana. How are you? Now, having said that, Doc, I love the journey that you've been taking us on. And, you've been helping a lot of companies do digital transformation. You're providing, like you said, you're a service company. You really have a
Yeah.
great understanding of each of your customers to develop technologies uh, which help them scale their businesses. What are the opportunities you see emerging in terms of businesses here in the Philippines, especially since you've worked with so many companies to digitally transform them? What do you think is coming up in this world when it comes to in terms of
Yeah, great.
businesses?
Actually, best question of the night, yan, actually. But at the end of the day, there's so much opportunity. Like, we work with clients, but we don't exactly have products of our own. So if you
Mhm.
notice, we focus as a service provider. But there's so much opportunity. So I teach a big data processing class, for one. And I keep on telling my students, you know what? Companies have not tapped the potential of the data they have.
Mhm.
They have so much data, especially here in the Philippines, conglomerates, right? So much data. And, there are so many use cases. The only problem we have is that we need people to focus, to build focus solutions, for example, for pharmaceuticals, for example, not, I build the data solution for banks. It'll be very specific. I build the data solution for lending, onboarding fraud, etc. A lot of the great startups I see right now are very niche. Like this whole EKYC trend where you don't have to
Mhm.
show up in the branch and you just have to show your face on the camera. All of those startups, those are all data and analytics startups that look at a niche problem. And there are so many of these little problems in the industry. Plant optimization, menu optimization for people who, fast food chains like Jollibee and McDonald's, right? You have a menu for certain products. You have to optimize the raw materials. All of that, there's so much. And before, what we would do, or what the industry would do, was buy expensive software to do analytics and would hire people to do the analytics. But I think the opportunity is really to build specific solutions already for specific use cases. It works. And the EKYC trend right now shows that. The lending, lending intelligence trend shows that. Now, there are many, many other use cases outside of EKYC and lending. And I think we've only just started. And I think the time is right. Number one, hardware is cheaper now, right? With cloud and all, you can actually get computing hardware. So doing machine learning today is not as expensive as doing it a few years back. That's number one. Two is the software is readily available. Python, scikit-learn, TensorFlow, and the cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, and others also have their own big data stacks, right? And it's free. When I teach my big data class today, none of the software is proprietary. They're all
Mhm.
open source. They're all readily available. That's the second trend. And the third trend is that data is also much more available. People collect more data now than ever, right? I mean, your cell phone today has something like 78 data points it collects, whether you like it or not. It knows whether the light is on or off. It knows whether the phone is tilting or not. It knows what time of the day it is, where you are, etc. Ang dami. And different organizations, different data collect all of that data. Of course, it's creepy din, and that's why data privacy is important. But being able to use that, all of these companies with all of these data points, sayang eh. And that's where all the opportunity is, looking at all of these resources and assets and finding these spectacular products that solve specific problems. And I think that's the way to go. And it doesn't take a big organization to do that. I mean, any startup with the brains, the effort, and the will to do it, kaya yan. But we have to help them on the funding side because they won't scale. But feeling ko yun
Exactly.
yung missing piece here sa Pilipinas talaga. Right?
Exactly.
There's so much good ideas, but to go beyond to scale is challenging.
And we're at least, well, at least we're right now. I'm also involved heavily in the startup community. We're seeing more funding versus before
It's good.
coming into the
Yeah.
community, and which I think augurs well for us. No, but having said that, Doc, why you, for example, for you, theoretically, if you weren't going to be doing this one, if you weren't doing the work for MDI Novare, which of these big data opportunities would you actively pursue because they really pique your interest, or there's something that you want to sink your teeth into?
Well, I think one is I really think that there is a lot of opportunity in the alternative financial instrument space, right? Trying to find ways in which money can be, well, the concept of money can and be used. And I think there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system that still can and be had. And I think the regulator, BSP, has made a statement, right? The unbanked is still quite large. COVID has
Mm-hmm.
helped make people digital, and they go to banking. But imagine all of these wallets, all of these ayuda wallets in, I mean, what's the money doing, right? Sometimes people just withdraw it and still use cash, or they use it to pay certain things. There's there is an opportunity there, harnessing that power, that entire ecosystem that has already been built. I mean, it was built because of a tragedy, right? I mean, the lockdowns and the pandemics. But I think that's also an opportunity, because now you have all of these people who have suddenly become digital, right? But have no use for their digital assets because the acquiring side is not as pervasive yet, right? So all of these use cases at the other side of the fence, I think there's something there. And it has to go down to the far flung, not just the metropolitan areas, right? At the if I were to be aggressive, at the sari store, or at the, shucks, I was trying to find a different word, pero kubrador level, pero hindi naman. Gambling's bad, guys, but that edge, right? So yun yung thing eh. So it's very important that we bring the benefits of tech downstream, right? And I think there's opportunity there, and that's the reason why microfinance works here, right? And it's doing well. So I'm sure there's something there, something you can put two together, or something related to that.
Doc, as I listen to you, you're very passionate about technology. It's something that you do both as a business, as a profession, as something that you teach. But you've also elevated it to an advocacy. Kumbaga, you do it also for nation building. Can you share with us a bit more about that one, and why you think it's important also to pay it back that way?
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, we have there are a lot of areas in the country where they can use, that could use some help from technology people, right? And sometimes we have to volunteer. So I am co IT director and trustee of PPCRV, and for the simplest reason that PPCRV being an election observer, and our goal is really to have clean, honest, accurate, meaningful, and peaceful elections. But come 2010, right? So remember, in 2010, first automated elections, suddenly PPCRV needed people who knew technology. And at that time, I was invited by Mila, who said, you should volunteer because it's our first automated election. And the thing with technology is neither good nor bad, but it depends on how you use it, right? And at the end of the day, one of our greatest fears at the time, conspiracy theories were running in our head that, if we don't watch it properly, then cheating could really happen. So our job, or our role there, was basically we had to put in additional poll watching that was tech related, right? Specific for technologies. And that's why now we have things like source code review, right? I mean, before automation, you didn't have to review source code of the election system because there was no election system. But that's now part of poll watching, right? So additional tasks, source code review, hardware testing, for example, final testing and sealing. You hear all of these terms. These are all venues for poll watching. But we also need technology aware people to help with that. And that's why I'm very passionate about, being able to help our country. And I felt that that was my way of helping the country, right? I know tech. I am in the information security space as well, because I actually teach that also. Actually, my PhD is in cryptography, to be specific, right? So it was something that I was in a unique position to help with. And it started out just as a volunteer thing, 2009. Yeah, so that's more than it's more than a decade ago, right? So I started to volunteer specifically to have these digital poll watching initiatives. So yun yung that's how it. And I encourage people then, because it has fulfilling in a different way, right? I mean, teaching is different because it's just different, but work is also different. But being able to do something to help your country, even in a small way, right? I mean, it's not gonna change the fate of millions, but it may actually. But you don't expect it to. But if many of us think in that way and many of us help, kahit konti-konti lang, it adds up. It adds up.
Spoken like a true Jesuit-trained academician
Yes.
and student.
That's right.
And having said that, I wish we had more time to speak, but I've learned so much and I'm very inspired by this talk, Doc William. And looking back at your 33 years, both as a technologist and an entrepreneur, and you've combined both, what are your three biggest life and business lessons that you want to share with people who are listening here right now, who are also embarking on the career or they're midway through the career, and you need to give them a little boost so that they can see that there's light at the end of the road?
Well, first is that you have to take pride in your work, right? You have to you have to be proud of your work. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be attached to it, that if somebody gets mad at it, you also feel bad. That's what I meant is that when you make something, it has to be a reflection of yourself, right? If you want people to perceive you as good, your work quality has to be good. So it's a craftsman's mentality. Mm-hmm. Anything you build has to be a reflection of yourself. That's the first one. Two is, for a conservative person and a risk-averse person like myself, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you have to take risks. Right? You can't play it safe. Okay? Parang if you just played it safe, and if I was looking back at my career and I played everything safe, I wouldn't be where I am right now, for sure. Right? I may not even be teaching. I might actually be doing something else entirely. Right? But taking risks is important. One of the earliest lessons in my career was I was pushing open source software. And in the 90s, late 90s, open source software like Linux, people would say, what's that? Why are you using that? You would be laughed at, etc. But now it's in every phone. Your Android phones have Linux. Your Mac devices have BSD Unix. These are all open source operating systems. But not, 20 years back, people were laughing. But I took the risk, right? I was willing to say, no, I'm going to use this piece of software and I'm going to fix your problem, right? And this one was for a call center. And I remember the call center manager told me, okay, I'm going to do your solution, William, but the call center makes $15 an hour per agent. And you're going to install it on 40 workstations. So kung magda-down siya ng 4 hours, sino magbabayad yan? It's like pressure. I said, I can't afford it, but I'll take responsibility. And that was enough for her. It's enough for her. And of course, she took the risk then. But it worked out. We were able to migrate the software. We used Linux, and all was well, right? And eventually, we migrated the whole the whole floor. Of course, I was so conservative. I had backup after backup after backup, but still took the risk, right? And I said, gang ho. And that moment, that who's going to pay for that moment? I'll take responsibility, but I can't afford it. Pero, di ba? So lesson number 2, you have to take risks. Hindi pwedeng super play safe lang eh. And three, you have to be open and you have to learn all the time. Learning never stops, right? I mean, this is one of the things that people ask me, why do you know so many things? Well, I read, and I read all the time, because you can't just be okay na with what you know right now, because what you know right now may not be, enough for later. And I'm sure there's always a better way, there's always a newer way. And just curiosity, you have to have that natural curiosity to learn new stuff, to try out new things. And this whole, like, for example, this whole big data ecosystem thing was also a new thing, right? Who knew what Hadoop was in 2007? Big data ecosystems. Now it's used by many, many large organizations, right? So we say we have systems that can ingest 4 terabytes a day. That's like 4 whole laptops a day worth of data. And that's normal today.
Wow.
But that software in 2007, hindi pa nga version 1, people will say, are you gonna, parang, does that work? But you have to have genuine curiosity to try it out and to use it. And point number 2, you have to also have the guts to try it out, diba? So, yun yung ano. So, yun yung siguro yung 1, 2, 3, right? For me, diba? Parang, ano yan, you have to have you have to always learn, for sure. You have to have the guts, diba? You have to just do it. Yun lang.
Well, thanks so much for sharing. I'm very inspired by all this one, and I hope to review again our podcast here for a lot of. I think if people were listening here right now, not spoken like a techpreneur, but also as a great teacher as well. William, thanks so much again. Can we just plug again your podcast over here for people to listen to?
So thanks very much for inviting me, RJ. So please listen to my podcast, From Course to Career, in My Digital Impact, right? And also, my colleagues also have their own sub-shows within My Digital Impact. So please check it out. Thank you very much.
Again, thanks so much. This has been RJ Ledesma on the RJ Ledesma Podcast. We will hear from you guys in the next podcast. And then happy EDSA Day tomorrow. And before everything else, may I just invite everybody to pray for peace in Ukraine. After seeing the news here tonight. Again, guys, thank you so much. This has been RJ Ledesma. Have a great weekend, guys. Thanks so much.
Have a great weekend. Thanks RJ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doc, stay around lang.